Welcome to Wild and Exposed, your number one adventure, nature, and outdoor photography podcast. Wild and Exposed is hosted by Mauro, Ron Hayes, and Jason Loftus. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome to another episode of Wild and Exposed podcast. We've got myself, Ron Hayes, in Wyoming. Mauro, been up in the Arctic Mauro been in the field for about 45 days. Is that right?
45 days, just back. I've been back for about a week, so I'm getting readjusted.
You're getting reacquainted with a mattress?
Yep.
Mattress and a shower.
And a shower. We can go into more of that in a little bit.
Yeah. Jason Loftus just coming back to the continent from the dark continent. Finally got to Africa. How was that?
Wow, man, it was amazing.
Sorry, that's just an intro question. We're not going to get into the depths of it
yet. I understand.
Yeah, I got so many questions.
Me too. Yeah, you were sending me, so you took your Zoleo, but you also there were several places where you had phone service. So you were sending me a text every once in a while, just with these little teasers, kind of taking little jabs at me for not going with you. And I will tell you, I was regretting it big time, because it sounds like you guys had a great trip.
Yeah, we really did. And, just on a side note, the Zoleo, I did take it with me, and it did come in clutch a couple times. I'll be honest with you. I really am loving having that thing. It's something we've talked about before, but having that thing and having the ability to just touch base with, like, my mom, for example, and let her know where I am and I'm safe. And for whatever, that's a big deal to moms, right? Even though I'm, 49 years old, and it doesn't matter. It's a big deal to mom. So anyways, yeah, having that availability to just kind of check in and touch base, and especially when I didn't have any Wi-Fi or cell service, which was, there was a large portion of the trip where that was the case too. So yeah, it came in clutch a couple times. So love having that thing.
It is. It's sweet. It was the same for me in the Arctic. Only there was no Wi-Fi. It's just Zoleo every day. And then having the unlimited plan was kind of cool, because then I could keep you guys updated. And then obviously my mom, just like you.
Yep.
You mama's boys.
Yeah, I admit it.
So what'd you do for, was it mostly Wi-Fi, or did you buy a SIM card when you got over there?
So for me, my work has my cell phone is through my work. So they have that international plan where when you go international, I think it's like $10 a day, and it still gives you your voice and your service, your whatever. So if you use data or, cell data or data to transfer, a text or whatever, then you're going to pay that $10 that day. So there's multiple days, like I said, where I didn't have, service. So I just wasn't using it at that point. But the days I did, I think it ended up being like 3 days. So it ends up being like $10 a day for those 3 days. So
it's not bad.
When I had Wi-Fi, I just would text via, my iPhone. I would just text via my the Wi-Fi, the internet, and turn my data off. So
on the Zoleo, did you send locations? Because that's kind of fun too. I love sending locations from that.
Yeah, I did. I sent my mom a couple different times, and one was from the camps that we were at, and then another time I sent it from being just out in the field and that. And I talked to her about it when I got home, and she thought it was pretty cool to be able to see. She'd pull it up and go, check it out on Google and do the live view and all that, and not the live view, but you know what I mean, the actual image view, so you could see. And she's like, that's pretty cool. So yeah,
I thought that'd be kind of cool just for historical purposes too, right? So if you have all this data that you sent to somebody else with the lat and the long, in 5 years you can go back to it and say, oh, I filmed a blah 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 right here, or this was the camp I stayed at, which would be kind of cool, because that's easy to forget the actual location if you're not going back to the same place frequently.
It's funny you said that, actually. So on this trip, I committed finally. We've talked about it before. I have, anyways, to starting to write a photography journal. And I finally did on this trip, because there was so much stuff we were seeing in that I didn't want to forget some of the nuances and the details of the things we were seeing. So every night I tried to be disciplined enough to go ahead and write my journal about the things we saw that day. And I actually use the Zoleo to write down those very feature that latitude longitude stuff. So I had that as well in my journal. So you could use a GPS for that, not as well. But the Zoleo, with having the Zoleo, just makes it super simple to see that. So
Yeah, I had somebody ask me if I was doing a journal too, and I basically said no, but I'm doing a journal through text messages every day. So by having the Zoleo Unlimited plan, and then whether I was telling my mom or you guys or whatever, I was saying, "Oh, I just filmed a blah blah blah, and it's been really cold," and it's basically what you would put in a journal, only it's in the form of text messages. So I thought, well, I kind of am doing a journal, but not exactly like you would be doing when you're writing it down.
sure. That's a cool way to think about it. I didn't think about it that way, but you're right. All that history is there. You can refer back to it. So
It's a new book idea.
yeah,
Rather than
there
your
you go.
journal, you can just do my text messages.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Text messages home. No,
right.
Zoleo messages home.
Zoleo messages. Yep. Zoleo messages from the field.
There you go.
Well, while we're talking about it, let's just put it out there that we still have the promotion going on with those guys. So you can get your
The
$20
deal, too.
activation fee waived when you fill out the paperwork, just put in wild exposed. No and, just wild exposed. And they'll waive the $20 activation fee for the Zoleo. And you got 3 different plans, so you don't have to go in full bore with unlimited stuff. If you just want to check in, I think it's 20 messages or $20 for the lowest plan. So it's affordable for just staying in contact or for emergency stuff.
Mhm.
Right. It is a good peace of mind, that's for sure. I mean, we were never alone, or we had people around us that could get us places or whatever. But um, having that peace of mind when you don't have cell service to be able to get help if you needed it, more of the backcountry Alaska stuff is what I'm kind of thinking of, right? Or even backcountry here in the States, anywhere. If you don't have cell service, it could come in
Yeah,
clutch
there's
for sure.
a lot of little pockets. The pockets that you're going to get in trouble in,
Right.
they're the ones that don't have any service. Even just in Wyoming around town. There's those locations where you're going to go and you're going to drop down into a canyon, or you're looking for a mountain lion or whatever, and there's no service at all. So it's a great tool to have even when you're not in you know northern Alaska or Africa. It's a
Right.
great tool to have real close to home. So
Well, and where I was at, I made sure I had it every day. I made sure it was charged every day because you just don't know. I mean, we were about 150 miles away from the nearest town, not necessarily a town. It's just like where you might be able to get some help. So it's not like you're not going to get someone to show up just like that. And normally in these kind of camps where I go, we have a plane or we have a helicopter or something close by. So you don't have to worry as much. But this one, we would go 20 days without seeing an airplane or anything, and nobody except for our little group. We never saw people come by. We were so remote that having that Zoleo was kind of like a little peace of mind. It wasn't dangerous or nothing, but you just never know, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Things can go wrong in a hurry, and it's the things you don't expect or plan for that always bite you. So
Yep. Yeah, on my trip we had really good weather most of the time, but you never know. Up in the Arctic, it can snow at any time. I think it snowed the day after I left, it would have been cool, but I'm glad I was gone because snow and blowing and just cold is
so that's a
it's a lot.
that's a good contrast, because when we're communicating, you're talking about, it's 40 degrees. I'm here in eastern Wyoming, and we had several days that were in triple digits, just based on the time of year. And then Jason, you're traveling to Africa, but you're traveling to Africa, southern Africa, in their wintertime,
right,
right? So how
right.
were the temperatures there?
Yeah, I think we had the gamut covered. Mike with the low end, and I was right there in the middle in the sweet spot. And we were in lows of 45, 50. Highs of, I think
Hmm.
one day it got up into the low 80s, and the rest of the time it was mid 70s for highs. Unusually rainy for them this time of year. They've had nothing but tons of rain. So even with that being the case, I never really had any problems with any mosquitoes or bugs. I was really surprised with all that. So,
Mhm.
Really?
yep, yep.
Were you, when I went to Africa the first time, growing up and watching all the stuff that we watch, right? You just assume, oh, it's going to be hot and it's just going to be all these cool animals that live in the warmer temperatures. But I can remember riding down the road early, first thing in the morning, freezing my butt off because we were in safari trucks that actually had a seat up above. So there's no windshield, there's no nothing. And you're going down the road and you're like shiver. And
Yep.
by 10 o'clock, it's nice and it's perfect. But first thing in the morning, it gets kind of chilly. Was that the case?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. We fortunately Drew warned us of that, right? He's experienced, and he told us to bring beanies and a decent jacket and some gloves just in case. And it all comes down to the humidity. So at 45 degrees, riding around 15, 20 miles an hour in one of those safari vehicles without a windshield or any windscreen, it gets pretty chilly. It feels like 32 or 35, whatever. So yeah, it was usually pretty chilly in the morning and the evenings. Not so much in the evenings. We usually get back to camp after the night drives before it got too chilly. But my wife would tell you otherwise. I think she felt like she was cold most of the time, when we were in the safari vehicles. But for a guy like me, it was nice. I was really loving it, knowing that it was triple digits back here at home. So
Yeah, but let's put that in context. We'll be in Yellowstone and in the wintertime and it's 20 degrees outside and you're in a long sleeve t-shirt covered up with a button up shirt and that's it.
yeah, that's true.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I admit I
and
like
we'll,
it a little
we'll
bit
cut
chillier.
your bride
Jason
some
runs
slack.
warm.
Yeah, we'll cut your bride some slack.
So
Yeah,
if you all ever come on an adventure with Jason, just don't take his recommendations for clothing don't take them seriously. You may want to
don't ask
double
me
up
what
on
don't
whatever
ask
he
me what I'm
says. Double up.
taking. Right, right. Don't
Yeah.
ask me what I'm
Yeah.
taking. Just yeah, that's all I took was just a light jacket. And I'll tell you, one time I was a little chilly. I ended up putting the rain poncho on that they had because it was chilly enough, and it actually rained on us a couple days. And we were told
Mm-hmm.
this time of year there's no water. It's their dry season. It's going to be sunny, blue skies. The growth would be really low, and everything we heard from the locals there was it was way unseasonably wet, and the grasses were actually pretty high. It was like their fall is more what they related it to as
Mm-hmm.
far as the growth and everything. So, but thank goodness the
So
bugs.
was that better for photography, you think, having that rain, or do you think it would have been better if it would have been drier?
I don't know if it was better or worse. I mean, the scenarios we ended up in, it ended up working and playing out fine. I was worried about it, certain scenarios with the grass being too tall to be able to really photograph some of the animals. But for whatever reason, where we ended up encountering them, it wasn't an issue. There's a few shots I got where some grass in the face and that, but trying to be artistic in that a little bit, that tells a story too, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you take some of those images and you leave the grass alone and let it be there because that's part of the reality of the situation. But yeah, for the most part, it wasn't a problem. It wasn't an issue, and I actually think it added because we actually had some color, which is unseasonably it's not the case generally this time of year. So, and this is South Africa again. I need to be clear because I don't think it was necessarily rainy, all over the place. But in Kruger specifically in South Africa, Johannesburg area, it was unseasonably wet.
My son just got back from West Africa, like on the Horn,
Uh-huh.
and he said the same thing. He said it rained a lot on them, but they were kind of in that rainforest type area, a little bit more than what you guys had. But he said it was pretty wet. I was
Yeah.
surprised. I mean, he went obviously for a different reason, but I was surprised to find out the only wildlife they saw were birds and bats. That was it.
Really interesting.
Mhm.
Huh.
Well, things are definitely changing. I mean, all across it's good to have this experience, right? Because
Right.
with people
Yep.
being over there and me being up here and you in Wyoming, and we had our crew showed up on the 1st, and we were supposed to be into camp on the 1st, and we didn't get out till the 12th because there was so much snow and no place to land these planes where we were supposed to camp. And then the sea ice is still blocking some of the filming that they're trying to do up there now, and they can't get out on the ice.
Wow.
So things are changing all over the place. Just patterns are changing, and it's too shallow of data set to know exactly if it's, crazy all over, or if it's always going to change. But things are definitely different.
I think it actually played into our advantage some with animal movement, because for whatever reason we got pretty spoiled where they'd have some pretty good rain at night, and then in the daytime, for the most part, there was a couple days where it rained on us, but which I actually like. I like some of the mood of the rain that the rain can bring too. But one morning we had a situation where it rained most of the morning and it was pretty slow. Then right as that rain broke, right, everything started moving pretty good, and that really played out to be in our advantage for one of the crazy encounters we had. So I won't get into that right
And
this
you
minute.
get you get that insane light scenario right when the storms break up too, and
Right.
that's my favorite.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You just always hope you're on something when the clouds part.
So for those that
But
can't see what happened right there, is Ron just got the chills and he shuddered a little
I just had a shiver.
bit. And I can relate.
Yeah. So Mike, you were doing a video project, obviously, and what was the terrain like up there? I mean, you think northern Alaska, you think you're going to be like everywhere else in Alaska against the mountain ranges. What was it like way that far north?
Right. And I had no idea what to expect. I'd never been up that far north. So I got out there, and when you fly out, it's pretty much flat, but it's full of wetlands. There's just so much water up there. So it was pretty much flat, lots of water, and everything is sand. There's no rocks, the only topography were like sand dunes. It was a pretty interesting topography. I would never in a million years expected to just see sand everywhere you went, whether it's the sand dunes or the river bottoms, or that tundra is all covered with, it's all just sand. So you look for dens, whether it was an Arctic fox, an Arctic ground squirrel, anything was just digging in sand. So it's pretty easy and great for den sites and some of the animals. It's got to be a lot easier than living in the rocks. But I took one picture one night just on my cell phone walking back. And if I showed you guys that picture, and in fact, I'll put it in the show notes, it could have been, you would have think that I was in like Baja on the coast of somewhere beautiful, 75 and sunny. It was crazy. It was just a whole different ball game out there. And it's so flat that the wind blows pretty frequently. So those sand dunes it's just that same, the reason you get sand dunes everywhere, right? Just that wind, nothing to stop it. It's just blowing that sand around. And it was pretty cool. It's very, very flat. The only way you ever see any sort of topography is from a drone. You would not understand how beautiful it is if somebody just blindfolded you and dropped you off and just said, have at it. You would think it's just like this barren flat. But as soon as you take a drone up in the air, it was amazingly beautiful as far as just seeing all the water and all the tundra, and it was pretty cool. And when we first got there, everything was brown. And by the time I left 45 days later, everything was green. So it was kind of cool to see that transition too. We set up a lot of blinds for some of the filming we were doing. And when we did that initial blind set, we had to take a hammer with us and some big spikes because the tundra is still frozen.
Frozen ground. Yeah.
Yeah. You would step and it'd be like maybe 2 inches of tundra that was soft and smushy. But then right below that is just solid ice. But it melted pretty fast. So by the time we left, you could put a tent stake in, or a stake to hold the blind up just with your foot. You could just smash it into the ground. But you walk through a lot of water too, and you would wear just like hip waders or chest waders. And it's interesting because you can feel the ice underneath in the water, underneath the whatever the bottom, all that plant material and just all the whatever sediment that's down in the bottom of these little sloughs and ponds and stuff. And it's just a sheet of ice down there. It's pretty interesting. You walk along, you could feel a little crack. It was, it'd be cool to see a lot of that stuff. They were telling me about some of those rivers that you can cruise down and see this humongous blocks of ice on the side, on the banks. I didn't get to see that anywhere, but that would be kind of cool. I was on the lookout for mammoth tusks, but I never found one.
Didn't score, huh?
No.
Wouldn't that be?
But we
that
didn't
would
have any
be
transportation. We got flown in there, and basically it was just a camp, and you had to walk everywhere. So, you might get 6 or 7 miles out. So you're just seeing such a small fraction of what the possibilities are for that whole Arctic region. So I can see why I didn't. But I think it's potential. The potential is there to see that kind of stuff. I just didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hmm.
The coolest thing about the spot is the midnight sun. Being able to see sun 24 hours a day, it never set the whole time I was there. It was pretty cool. We got to the point where we were shooting. You wouldn't even think about going out till like 9 p.m. And then you would stay out till 6 or 7 in the morning and then come back and try to sleep.
Shoot all night.
Just shoot all night. And this is the prettiest light. It just, low on the horizon for so many hours. It never set, and it wasn't seriously low. It wasn't like it was almost touching the horizon. It was pretty high in the sky. But, if you're in Colorado or Wyoming or Utah this time of year, what is it, about 8? No, probably 7 o'clock when you get that, start getting that pretty light.
8 o'clock, yep.
It's like that, only it's that way for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours. So that was pretty cool. I think we went in. So the summer solstice is on June 21st. We went in on the 11th. I don't know when the sun actually rises above the horizon. If I had to guess, I would say it was sometime in May probably. And then it doesn't set below the horizon until July 29th. So it's just pretty cool. Pretty cool situation, especially as a photographer, just because you get to see that pretty light all the time.
So I've caught myself whining a little bit because I've just been shooting close to home for a while. And I had some people come through town, and we had a family reunion not too long ago. And I just get reminded that people come here for vacation. This is where they want to go to get away. And just get reminded how lucky we are to live in some of these remote areas. I mean, even where you guys are at, there's city, but you can escape it and not be too far from home when you're down in the States, Mike. And so I've taken the opportunity to go out and just spend my mornings out, get a report of burrowing owls. So I'm out trying to film burrowing owls, and then I just got some people that told me about these raccoons, and they've got raccoons that have almost yellow hair, and instead of black masks, they have like these gold masks. Well, they caught them on video, and so I'm gonna go try to catch these guys. They don't have tails; they got little stubby tails, and it's it's just a genetic thing in this one area.
Are you sure it's not a bobcat?
I'm positive. Yeah, I saw the video. Yes, it is for sure not a bobcat. I did think badger when they said no tail. I was like, yeah, but they know what they're talking about. So, but I've been enjoying that. I did get my vehicle my insurance agent is probably going to question this one, but I was filming burrowing owls, and they've already fledged, so you don't know where they're going to be. So what I did was I just set my tripod up in the back of the Pilot, and so I can just drive and film out the window, use the vehicle as a blind, and cover it up if I need to, so they don't see my movement. And so I'm sitting there. I've got 2 owls, and then 2 others flew in to where these guys were at, and they were all just kind of hunting bugs around these prairie dog holes. Well, then all of a sudden, they all snapped their heads up in the same direction, so you knew something was coming. And my first thought was probably an antelope, and my second thought was, hopefully it's some kind of predator that's going to come sniff around the burrow, if at a minimum. No, it was a herd of longhorn cattle, and I'll send you a couple clips for the show notes. But there was 2 bulls, and they got on both sides of my Pilot, and they were wanting to get at each other. So the vehicle got beat up a little bit, and then I decided I was going to get out and try to spook them, push them off and out of the area, because the owls obviously, they gathered up and went underground. So I popped the door, just reached back and popped the door. I wasn't even looking, and there was a longhorn calf right there, and he jumped up and kicked my door right square in the middle of it, put a big dent in the door. So the wildlife was awesome, but the domestic life was a little bit rough on me. And I've had
I
to,
was wondering where that story was going when you had started out with insurance. I'm like, so what?
yeah, he's going
Did
to
the
ask some
owls
questions.
break into your car?
They popped some rivets off my bumper, so I've got to go get some new rivets and then put a couple good dents in my vehicle that I just haven't had for very long. So anyway, but all that to say, there's still good stuff around here, and it's a nice place to be, even though I'd rather have been in Africa or Alaska, either one. So Jason, what was the light like down there? I mean, you said it was kind of autumn, so shorter days.
Um, yeah, yeah, I was trying to think about that. So it was probably there's still probably 12-hour days. We would get up and get going about 5:30 or so, and a.m. and then that's when we'd wake up. We'd be in the safari vehicles headed out by 6, and it did get to be shooting light by 6:20ish or so, and then we'd be no light sunset probably right around 5:30, 6 o'clock again. And then
Mm.
the way those safaris work, we'd stop and have drinks and whatever for the sunset, and then you have the night drives, which is something I've heard about night drives, and they're kind of a big deal. um I I'm probably going to get hate mail for this, but to me it was like, let's just go back, we're good. I mean, I'm not going to be able to photograph anything we see. That's my mindset, right? Which is dumb.
Right.
I should have a different mindset sometimes, but it's like, yeah, this is cool if we see, a wild dog or a genet or a civet or something that you don't generally see in the daytime. That's the whole idea of the night drives. But we didn't see a ton of stuff. We saw some genets and we saw some things, but yeah, anyways. So to me, it was like, yeah, let's just go back. But by the time you got back to camp, it was 7 o'clock at night or so.
Mm-hmm.
And then you weren't
So
out
were
all
they
day,
using
obviously,
artificial lights to help light up stuff so you could possibly see something out there, or were you just
but
relying on just natural light?
no. So I mean, for the most of the safari, except for the night drive, they did use a spotlight. And then the whole idea is, right, is they don't spotlight the ungulates because of the temporary blindness. They don't want to, have them get taken by a predator because of something that they're doing. So, but then they would if they saw, hyenas or wild dogs or a lion or something, whatever, or these other night critters that it doesn't blind them, it doesn't bother them apparently. Then they would use that to shine on the animal so we could see it more. But most of the things we saw were pretty quick. They'd see us, you'd see the light, and they were there for a brief minute, and then they were gone. So
Hmm.
we had one night we had a hyena that wouldn't leave and kept coming around and giving us a pretty good show at night, which was kind of fun. And that was before I had really had a chance to photograph any hyenas, so it was still cool to see one. And then I got my fill of hyenas the rest of the trip for sure. So
Yeah,
Did you have
your
any
first
at your
trip to
camp?
Africa, and you're already rolling your eyes about the stinking wildlife.
no. That came across wrong. But I was my point was there's some animals that I had on my list that I was really hoping to see, right? And a lot of them were things that I knew were going to be pretty rare to see. Now I think hyenas are pretty, you see hyenas for sure, but for the most part they're fairly nocturnal. And I was just hoping that we'd have some scenarios where we'd get to photograph them. Is my point. And we ended up having more than I could ask for as far as that goes, as far as being able to have good scenarios with decent light and good behavior and some things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, ended up being, I kind of referred to it as kind of the Lucky Charm trip. It really, we saw so much stuff that, I mean, we had photographed the Big Ten in the first 2 days. That's the kind of trip we had. And
So
You
then,
know
rattle
that
off the Big Ten real quick because you got.
oh boy, you're going to put me on the spot.
Yeah, well, I can help. We'll help, but I just so
Right.
it's elephants and lions and
Elephant,
cheetahs,
lions,
leopard,
cheetahs, leopard,
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 rhinos,
rhino. Well, two species
hippo.
of rhino.
hippo. We had black and white, and we did see both, which was
That's awesome.
crazy, right? Um, I don't know. No, I can't remember what we
The
said.
buffalo has got to
Yeah,
be one.
the Cape buffalo for sure. Yeah, I don't know how we missed that.
Yeah.
That's in the big five. What are we missing?
We're
We said
close.
elephants. We said elephants, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would a giraffe be in there?
No, I don't think so. I'm looking it up real quick because this is gonna bug me. But Big Ten. I don't. I haven't been enough to really have this stuff memorized, but
Kudu.
I don't think it's in there.
I think a lot of that plains game probably doesn't fall on the list, right? So
No, it probably doesn't.
there's 3 of the cats, and then of course the
Yeah, it's the 3 cats, the lions, or the. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna look it up real quick. 3 of the cats.
elephants, rhinos, and hippos and buffalo. That's 4, so that's 7 right there.
Lion, leopard, cheetah, rhino, elephant, hippo. A giraffe is one. Crocodile, buffalo, and zebra.
You got to see
Oh.
crocs down there.
Oh yeah, yeah. We saw.
Yeah.
Well, actually, in one of the camps we were in, we had it wasn't our vehicle, but another vehicle stopped to get their drink in the morning, and stretch their legs right by a pond, and ended up being a crocodile in there that they got to photograph and taken out down on Impala.
Oh wow.
So that would have been. We didn't see it ourselves, but the lady came back to camp and showed us the photos, and that was pretty cool. So yeah, we had seen all that and photographed it within the first 2 days, so the rest of it was like butter, right? And ended up having multiple encounters with some really, really cool critters. One of the critters I didn't realize they were as big a deal as they were was the wild dogs. And
Yeah,
they're
a huge
fairly,
deal. Yep.
they're very endangered, and they're only in South Africa, if I remember right. And they say that in Kruger, there's probably only, numbers vary that I've seen, but I've seen anywhere from 200 to 400 left. And so to see one is pretty rare. According to the guide, seeing them is pretty cool, let alone photographing them. And we saw probably about 30 wild dogs, and twice we actually were in the middle of them hunting and got to see them taken down. Well, you didn't get to actually see them taken down anything, but we were there at the aftermath. And one cool thing is their success rate hunting is like 80 or 90% because they're a pack animal.
Yeah, and they just outrun everything.
Right, they just wear them out, and so they have a really, really high success rate, and they pretty much just hunt nonstop. They'll go because they don't kill big stuff, but they kill a lot of smaller stuff, and the hyenas just follow them around.
And it's funny, and the other predators steal their kills, so they have to hunt constantly.
Right. So I was surprised though. I thought the hyenas, because they're just so much bigger, and that would come in and just take their stuff, and they weren't. The hyenas were waiting for scraps. I was really surprised. Matter of fact, I didn't get any photos of it at all, but right by the safari vehicle, the hyenas came in and the dogs got after them, and it was like it was pretty wild. It was lots of. I wish I'd have had my cell phone going just to catch the sounds and the craziness of the situation, because it was like, you're like putting your arms in the vehicle like, holy crap, man, this is crazy. These guys are going at it, but yeah, it was amazing. So that was cool, just to have 3 different encounters with the wild dogs alone was amazing and lucky. And then, an hour into our trip, we ended up seeing a leopard in a tree with a porcupine that was photographable. We ended up seeing another leopard
with a porcupine as prey, or a porcupine
as prey, eating it in the tree. He actually had matching quills sticking out of his cheeks, which was kind of funny.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. But and then we ended up seeing a big male in a tree later on in the trip. It was in a really thick tree though, really low to the ground, but really thick. But he had an impala in there and was eating on it. I mean, I took a few photos. There was a couple photos where you could see his eye through the leaves kind of thing, and you could tell it was a leopard with a kill in a tree. But wasn't a great scenario for photographing. But still, we sat there and watched him eat on it and just enjoyed the experience. And then had another leopard that walked right by our vehicle, and I posted a photo today actually of that leopard situation where it was a female, and she was kind of walking around marking trees and stuff, and ended up jumping up in a tree in front of us. But it was a thick tree, and it's like, there's so many amazing trees around here with no leaves. Why don't you jump up in that one? You can get that whole silhouette sunset shot of a leopard in a tree, right? But yeah, anyways. But yeah, I'm not complaining. Trust me, I'm not complaining. It was pretty
you were staying in tents too, but it was a little different scenario, right? It looked, from the images that you were sending back, it looked like you were a little spoiled and Mike was in his cot.
Right. Yeah, we were definitely spoiled compared to Mike's situation, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, no, maybe I'll talk a little bit about that, right? So just kind of the itinerary of the trip, because Drew Butterwick put this trip together for us, and we're working on doing another trip next year for just in conjunction with Wild and Exposed, and the itinerary was incredible because we got to see a lot of different aspects of Kruger. So we flew into Johannesburg, we flew into Skakuza, which is an airport in the park. It's the only airport in the park. And then we rented vans from there, and we drove the vans to the first safari camp. And the first concession we went to was actually, I don't know how to explain it, and I'm probably going to get this wrong. So folks that are more familiar with Africa can correct me on this, but the way I understand it is it's kind of like the greater Kruger ecosystem, right? There's some concessions outside of the park boundaries, but they're still technically part of the park, I guess. And they lease the property to people to manage and to run as a concession. And I think most of the concessions are around 25,000 acres or so, something like that. But again, be very clear, because this actually surprised, but no fences anywhere, right? None of these, the animals all roam wild. It's just, to them, they don't know the boundaries of the park, right? Just like Yellowstone in the Tetons. But then they can manage these areas. And the first area we went to was kind of a central lodge. And this is like most safaris, apparently. But they have safari vehicles, and then they had 6, I'd call them, they kind of look like yurts to me, and they had a name for them. But they're like a round cement building with, these were pretty nice. They had very nice accommodations inside, a very nice bed, and actually had an outside door where you had an outside shower, and, grass ceilings that they do quite often in South Africa, which I learned they do because of the storms and that. And they learned, years ago that the hurricanes would come through and blow the roofs off. Well, now they have a very strong steel structure, and they just put the grass down. And then if they have the major storms, it just blows the grass away. And then they can just relay grass down without having to rebuild the roofs. So anyways, very nice accommodations. We actually started joking about this about 2 days in, that this was actually a food safari. And we were just taking some photos every now and then, right? Because they just feed you and feed you and feed you. I mean, and the food was amazing. That's another thing I noticed right off the bat was from Africa versus the States was it really felt like you get a really good glimpse into what our country allows in our food and maybe what other countries don't. Like, I don't think they have like processed sugar in their drinks over there. The food was all fresh. The vegetables were fresh. We got to try wild game, which was awesome. We had some kudu steaks a couple times. We had springbuck shanks one night. We had some fish that was a local fish that was really amazing. So every night we had, really good meals and that. But long story short, this lodge was really, really nice. And they had the 6 outbuildings, if you will, and that's where we were staying. And then every day is the safari, kind of like I already explained. You get up early, you have like a pre-breakfast, some snacks and coffee if you want, and then you hit the safari vehicle. You have around 9 o'clock, you have a drink, stretch your feet, whatever you want again. Then you make it back to camp by the time the light's garbage and the animals are asleep. Then you have the middle of the day to just kind of nap, go shower, get a massage, whatever you want to do. Charge batteries.
That was kind of nonchalant the way you threw that in there.
Well, I mean, that's literally
go
it's
back,
like no
take
big
a nap,
deal.
dump your cards, get a massage.
Right. I mean, that's the kind of accommodations you got. And it wasn't nice enough weather for us to get in the pool, but both the camps we were in had pools. And my wife ended up taking advantage of the massage one day, which was cool. So yeah, you had a lot of those options you could do. And for me, the most part, I'd just go back and chill and, maybe get a Coke Zero or whatever and just hang out and talk with Kelly and them or whatever and about what we'd been doing and what we'd been seeing and that. And then maybe take a nap. And then you have lunch and then you had breakfast, at like 10 o'clock, 10:30. And this was like a cooked breakfast, like eggs, bacon, sausage, whatever. And then you would have lunch at 2, and it's a hot lunch, right? It's a full meal. And then at 3, you have high tea, so you had more drinks. And then they always had like a charcuterie board or something there too, obviously, because they're obviously not getting enough food. And then and then they'd ask you what you wanted for your sunset drink, so you'd tell them. And then you'd go out on your safari at about 3 o'clock. You'd leave for your safari in the evening. And then at sunset, you'd have your drink with snacks. again, because you don't have enough food. And then you'd come back for your night drive at 7 or 7:30. You'd have dinner, and then you'd sit around a campfire or whatever. And both of the camps had situations where, again, no fences or anything, so the animals were just roaming free. And multiple times while we were there in the camps, you'd have one had a pond, a water hole across from where we'd sit to eat and stuff in the campfire, and they had a spotlight on the water hole from by a tree. And we had elephants come in and drink at the water hole while we're sitting around the campfire, or hyenas come by, or whatever. It was really cool. And then, and then we left that camp after a couple days, and we actually went into the park in the vans, and we did our own thing in the middle of the trip, where we actually drove around Kruger itself, the proper Kruger, and we stayed at Mopani, which is a more northern part of the camp. So we got to see the terrain, which was different, and the critters, which was somewhat different, up in that northern area of the park, and to see more. We saw more tuskers up there, and saw more of that kind of stuff, more kudu, more of that kind of stuff. And then we ended up going back down after a couple of days of that. Went back down south and went and stayed in a private concession, which was a different flavor, right? They have a lot more freedom to do what they want. They can drive off road. They can whatever. That's private property. Again, no fences, but they can, like the public concession is what I'd call it, which I know it's not the right term, but the one that was more like public property, Kruger proper, was you could go off road if you saw the Big Five and were trying to photograph the Big Five. That was their rules. If you were in the private concession, they pretty much can do whatever they want, and they would go off road no matter, for whatever, it was just at their discretion. And you actually could get out of the vehicles in those in the middle of the park, right? You're technically not allowed to get out of the vehicle. And even in the public one, you're not allowed to get out of the vehicle for obvious reasons, right? I mean, there's big cats that might eat you. Not that they ever were a threat, but that's the danger that's there if you're not careful. So in the other one, though, in the private one, you could actually get out of the vehicle. And there were certain scenarios where the guide let us get out and photograph some things so we could get little lower angles and stuff like that. But that was another situation where in this camp, we were actually in tents, and these were glamour. These weren't Mike tents. I'm sorry, Mike, but these were, these were essentially the same accommodations, nice big fluffy bed with the mosquito nets around them. An outside shower situation, which was great when it's 45 degrees outside and you're going to bed, and, you take a nice hot shower. And then, they actually had heated blankets and stuff if you wanted in the beds and stuff. It was glamping for sure. You had a sofa, you could hang out on your netted deck and do whatever you wanted. It was pretty amazing. And then they actually also had a central lodge area where you'd meet and eat and all that kind of stuff. And then the safari schedule was pretty much the same. So we actually had 7 days of actual safari time, and we experienced those 3 areas while we were doing it. So I actually was really impressed with the itinerary, is my point of that, of laying that all out, because we got to experience a lot of different ways to see the park. So
on a wild and exposed trip next year, it would be similar?
Yeah, that's the plan. It may not be the exact same itinerary. We're talking about maybe starting in the north and working our way south instead of doing up and down. But yes, it'll be something similar where we'll get to maybe do a northern camp that's more like the public concession maybe, and then do some time in the park, and maybe, whether it's when I said Mopani, I wasn't clear, but there's like 4 or 5 camps in the park too. And we stayed in public housing there, but they're essentially the same kind of buildings we stayed in the first lodge, but they're a little less swanky. And, it's pretty meager accommodations, but they're cheap. And in those scenarios, the thing that's kind of hard about it, you don't get the night drive situation because of the poaching situation, right? You're not allowed to be driving around in the park after dark. And so when you're staying in those camps, you actually have to be in the camp walls, which are high fence, and they have gates by 5:30 in the evening, and they shut the door. And if you're not in, you basically, I don't know what they do to you, but you're supposed to get in trouble, whatever that means. So, but yeah, anyways, so that limits you some, and then they don't open the gate in the morning until I think it's 6 o'clock in the morning when they open the gate. So you're kind of there, but they do it for reasons. Like when you're in the gates, right, you can walk around, do whatever you want. They had a restaurant there. They have like a general store. You can walk freely without having to worry about, predators and stuff roaming around. But so that's the reason behind it, and that's just a different experience. But anyways, starting up there, maybe staying in one like that, and then ending the trip down on the south end potentially. But that's what we're talking about doing, is something similar in that nature. So
So what was your favorite encounter on this whole expedition?
I've thought a lot about that, and it's hard to pin it down to just any one. But I'll tell you what, one thing, the leopard encounter right off the bat was crazy, because that's one that I really wanted to see, that I really just didn't think we were going to have a good situation to be able to see it and photograph it. I mean, having a leopard in a tree with a kill was like that was the shot I was wanting to try to get, right. And then to get it with like an hour into the trip, it's like, well, like, check. It's like, now what, right? It's like, this is crazy. But there's a couple critters that because you never see, when you don't see these animals in real life, you just don't have an appreciation for them. That's just the reality of it. I mean, you do, but you don't. You don't realize how little of appreciation you have for them until you see them in person. You get to see their behavior, their attitude, their personalities. And I'll tell you what, the couple of the critters I fell in love with was the Cape buffalo and those big tusker elephants. I mean, and I guess it's just, I like the ornery critters. I don't know. I like the ones that have attitude. I think that's a big reason I like bull elk and the rut, is because they got that testosterone and they got that attitude, and they show it a lot with their body language and their behavior. But yeah, those elephants, not even the big elephants, but the male elephants, they tend to have a little bit of an attitude. We had some young bulls that were even kind of flexing on us and coming at the vehicle and, swiping their foot in their trunk and throwing dirt on themselves and shaking their heads and all that funny, it's aggressive behavior, but it's from this little tiny dude. It's, it's just kind of funny. The safari guides were good about, kind of joking about that kind of stuff. But and then we had one that we were driving away, and he wouldn't do it when we were sitting there. When we started driving away, then he started chasing us down and doing that stuff. And he's like, "Oh yeah, talk big when we start to drive away," So it was pretty fun to see that stuff. But
So were there big groups of elephants, or did you always have like smaller groups?
So we actually did see, not unfortunately, but surprisingly, that was the word I was looking for. We did see quite a few big groups of elephants. I was surprised. Nothing probably like you'd see it like Amboseli or something like that, right? But for where we were, we saw, they weren't in good scenarios to photograph, but we did see a lot of elephants, and we saw a lot of big family groups. We'd ended up seeing, I don't know, 3 or 4 tuskers that were of, I'd say, I don't know, I'm just guessing, but based on what Drew told me, because I'm learning all this stuff still with these critters, but probably 70 pound tuskers, which is, that's the size and the weight of their ivory. And so that's probably, if you took one that was reaching the ground with their tusks, which is fairly rare anymore, that might be like 100-pound tusker. So that gives you an idea of one. It's probably about half that. So it's still a pretty big animal with pretty big tusks, but nothing like those ground draggers or whatever you want to call them, that you can see in Amboseli still. But actually Drew did see one that was probably 110-pound elephant in Kruger, and he wasn't even on the board. In Mopani, there's a really cool, like, an elephant museum in the camp, and you can go in there and see like some of the tuskers that have lived in the park, and they've got the big tusks mounted with the skulls and that, and that you can go see and stand by and touch and stuff. And then they've got like a wall of fame that shows the existing tuskers that are still alive and in the park, and kind of where their territory is, if you will. So it was kind of cool to see that, and then you can kind of get a feel for where, if you wanted to see one of the bigger tuskers, where you might want to spend some time in the park and just hope that you have an encounter, because it is a lot like Yellowstone that way, where you can't leave the road. There's a lot more roads you can drive on than in Yellowstone, but again, you can't get out of the car like you can in Yellowstone, right? So when you're in your own vehicle, you really need to be careful about those elephants. I think from what I've heard, they've turned a few cars over in their time. So, you definitely got to be careful and pay attention to animal behavior and not push it, and, give them their space and all that still. But yeah, to have those experiences with those big tuskers was just, I had one, I actually shared on my story. I came out of my tent, and I got quite a bit of flack from a few guys, which I understand. I get it. But I walked out of my tent, and there's this big tusker, and he would, I was like, I couldn't go by. He wouldn't let me by. But they move around quite a bit, so I just had to wait him out. So about 5 minutes, he was gone. But I just sat there and grabbed my camera and took some photos, and it looks like I'm really close, right? But I'm not. I mean, I could run in my tent if I needed to, not that would stop an elephant, but he wasn't worried about me, right? It was just one of those things where when I came out, I think I surprised him, and he kind of, reacted. And the video or the picture that Drew posted was of me taking a photo of this elephant with the tent kind of in the frame, and I had to plead my case to guys, listen, guys, I just came out of the tent and there he was. I wasn't I wasn't approaching this big old tusker, on purpose, but yeah, that's the cool thing about that place, the whole place. You just never know what you're going to see, and there's so much wildlife. I mean, I don't think there was a time when we weren't seeing something, even if it was just impalas. I mean, every time we were going around a corner, we were seeing something else: wildebeest, impala, giraffes, whatever it was. It was just everywhere. So pretty amazing.
I asked you about the wildlife encounter, which could not involve pictures.
Right.
Out of your pictures or the images or video you came away with, do you have a top 10 already, or have you even been through all of them?
I haven't even been through all of them. I mean, I've looked at them cursory, dumped them, onto the computer, and kind of went through and deleted the stuff that I did, duplicates, whatever. I ended up taking a total of 20,000 images, so a little trigger happy.
Yeah, but you have to over there.
Right. Oh, 100%. And here's the thing, right? A lot of the photos I'll never do anything with, but it's the first time I saw all those critters. Every single one of them was the first time for me. Mm-hmm. So, I shot it just because I could, and it's free and it doesn't cost me anything. And, but yeah, I don't know that I've got a top 10. I've got a couple that I'm really excited about that I haven't even edited yet. Some of the leopard one I posted today I was pretty excited about. I've got some Cape buffalo. I've got some hyenas. The wild dog stuff is pretty cool just because of how rare it is to see them. I do have a couple elephant ones that I'm excited to play with. So I mean, I think with all of the animals we saw, there's probably, even with the zebras and the wildebeest and the giraffes and stuff, I think there's photos that I'm excited about for each of the animals that we photographed. And I know a lot of it's just because I've never photographed it before, but it's hard in a scenario like that to go out there and try to get something new and unique because it's been done so many times. And you don't want to just have this stereotypical, while, there's the normal light with a portrait of an animal that's been done 800 times, So yes, I got a lot of that, but it's because I never photographed it before. And I also felt very fortunate to get some unique situations where I could play with light a little bit. And, I got a hippo, for example, coming out of the water that was backlit and some stuff like that, that I'm excited to play with. Just, different light situations. So,
okay. So listening to you talk about this goes back to what I was going to say earlier when you were talking about, feeling like a couple days into the trip, you had the 10 that you wanted, the Big
right.
10 or whatever.
Right. We had photographed the Big 10 and seen the Big 10, which is right.
But, and you said something about, I felt like it was this kind of trip. I was going to say, it sounds like a Jason Loftus trip to me. You get the critters and you get them in great light, and yeah, it doesn't sound like anything out of the ordinary for you.
Well, you know how it is too, right? I mean, once you've kind of photographed that animal and you've got I got the portrait, and then it's like,
now you can focus on.
Now let's focus on trying to do some cool stuff, That's kind of how I felt about it. But
yeah.
And then just the amount of encounters we had. I mean, I won't argue with that. I mean, we were very fortunate to have the number of encounters we had. We had
that leopard shot is crazy.
Well,
yeah, you keep saying you posted them, but I'm looking on your Instagram and I don't see them. Where'd you post them? Or maybe
they're there. They're just on the second row because Instagram has that new feature where you can pin photos. No, you're not seeing them. Yeah, you've been out.
I haven't been on Instagram forever.
Yeah, they're in the second row. There's a leopard shot and the Cape buffalo shot.
Yeah.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah, those. So me, just the lights and shadows and stuff. I just love to play with, obviously, and a lot of people do. But to get some of those scenarios where I could do some of that was exciting. That's what I was excited about.
Did you find the quintessential dark background Jason Loftus signature?
Yeah.
Light?
There's a couple scenarios where I think, I got some giraffes at long distance that I actually am kind of excited about. It's a little different kind of an image, but really dark background of trees and stuff with the giraffe in the light, kind of a situation. Some of that I'm going to play with and see, but not probably like the elk shot or whatever that we talk about. But, that kind of light I didn't ever have a situation like that, but that's with a trip like this, right? You're happy to see the things that you saw, and then the have some unique lights, just a bonus, because people go over there and do multiple safaris to see. I mean, I've heard people tell me already that have come back, and I've had chats with, that have said, I've been over there X amount of times and never seen a wild dog, for example. Or, I've been over there and never had a chance to shoot a leopard with a kill in a tree, but seen them, but never had a chance to photograph them, So, I mean, you realize how fortunate you are to have those encounters, and just, I'm not complaining at all. I mean, I think Drew tried to keep reminding us that you guys don't understand how lucky you are. You've seen 30 wild dogs in 3 days. And, there's a lot of locals that come here every year with the hopes to see a wild dog, so, and then to have them hunting right by the vehicle, and those interactions with the hyenas and all that, so it was an incredible experience for sure. And I mean, it's one of those now, it's like, yeah, when am I going back?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have a lot of these on my list, and I need to just quit my job and start traveling the world, I guess. But
Yeah, I did have a ticket for that Mega Millions that was at $1.3 billion.
Did somebody win?
Yeah, somebody in Wisconsin. So I'm hoping that it was Hood, and then maybe we can visit with him about
right.
coming on staff.
Yeah, no joke, huh?
So what kind of equipment did you take every day, and did you have dust problems, and did you have the go-to like setup, or did you have multiple cameras with multiple setups, or what? How did that work?
Great question, because I was stressing about that, obviously, before I went. I really was worried about having the right gear, and I was worried about the dust. That was a big one for me. But, it was crazy with it being as wet as it was. Didn't have any dust problems at all. I don't even think I worried about wiping my camera off one time as far as dust goes. I felt I had the exact right gear, and listened to Drew on that. I took my 400 millimeter. I also, you're on a couple small flights when you're going from Joburg to Skakuza, and you don't have the overhead room. So I definitely took a Pelican case, hard case, the Pelican Air that is hard sided, and it fits a 400 with a body. And then it also fits another body with my 70 to 200 and my 1.4. That was about perfect for that gear, and it fit in there perfect, and it was protected. And that's all I took with me. It was that, from a photography standpoint. And it was perfect. I used the 70 to 200 way more than I thought I would. There was times when we had elephants so close to the safari vehicle that 70 millimeters was too much. So, it's just the way it works there, and
That's what I was going to ask. I mean, some of those animals are so stinking big.
right.
70 millimeters is actually pretty tight.
It is. It can be. And again, like I said, I used the 7200 way more than I thought. So when I was in the safari vehicle, it was kind of a pain sometimes, because the one camp, we actually had 2 safari vehicles for the 10 of us. And that was perfect because we had room to set your extra gear in the seat, On the last one, we actually had all of us in one safari vehicle. So there was not an open seat. And so fortunately for me, my wife and my son were there with me, and my wife was kind enough to hold my 70 to 200 while I was using the 1 to 400 or my 400 or whatever. So it worked out. But, if as you're thinking about that, like for me, for example, if I went again and I knew I was going to be by myself in the vehicle with a full vehicle, I would definitely want like my cotton carrier or something on me, so I could keep my 70 to 200 tucked away on my chest rig or something and be able to still shoot with my 400. But yeah, that 400 ended up being perfect for a lot of the stuff. It was just like the perfect lens. And those guides, I mean, they try to put you close. I mean, there was times we were like, okay, we can back up some. I mean, I can't photograph that with my 400, and I really would like to get some stuff with my 400, with that cheetah on the ant or on the termite mound, So anyways, it was pretty incredible, all the stuff we saw. And then the gear ended up being perfect. I mean, as far as the what I would say, I didn't even pull out my 1.4. I actually just had somebody reach out to me and ask me about if they thought a 500 was too much. And I said, yeah, it's too much. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of it might depend on where you're going. But for me, with the experience we had and everything that Drew told us, the 400 was perfect. And in a lot of cases, it was too much. So I took the 1.4 just in case, but I never even took it out of the case.
Yeah, there's some places where you can do a little bit more birding, and you end up with like those bee catchers or whatever, and you
Right.
might want a little bit more lens there, but that would
Right.
be the only
Well, and
scenario.
I would say that's a fair point, Ron. And so if you are wanting to do birds too, right? So one of the things that I did notice is we'd pull up right next to like a lilac breasted roller, and they're just a beautiful bird, and they're all over down there. But a lot of times they wouldn't sit because we were getting so close that they didn't stay put. And if you had like a 1.4, then you could just get enough reach where they'd stay put and you could photograph it.
Mhm.
Our group wasn't focused on birds, but there's definitely a lot of birds for the birders out there. There's definitely a lot of birds down there to photograph. We saw some cool stuff, and I'm going to massacre the names because I'm not good at this. But like we saw we didn't get to photograph it, but I think they said a great hawk owl.
Mhm.
I think it was the largest owl that's in Africa. We saw one of those. We kind of kicked it up when we were looking for something else. And then we ended up, the yellow beaked hornbills, which are, the
Mhm.
what's his name from Lion King? Good gravy. We're calling him this the whole trip. Zazu, sorry, Zazu. So from Lion King, right? That's the yellow beaked hornbill. Anyways, and then we saw these really cool birds. They're about the size of a turkey. They're actually bigger body wise, but I want to say they're called. Oh, I'm gonna mess this up. It's something like a red beaked ground hornbill or something like that. But they're really crazy looking. They got a big black body, and then they got this really big hornbill, and they got red markings on their heads. So yeah, just some really off the wall critters that you see over there that are just running around. Even the guinea fowl are just kind of wild.
Mhm.
There was hundreds of them running around. Just everywhere. You'd almost run them over sometimes. They're just everywhere. But we saw sand grouse. We saw all kinds of different birds and vultures, obviously everywhere. We had a scenario where we had a dead elephant off the side of a road off one of the river drives, and it was literally 10 feet off the road, but it was in super thick brush, and there was vultures and hyenas coming and going from this elephant carcass. And you're 10 feet away in your vehicle when we were in the vans, and just roll the window down, and there they are. There's a hyena on an elephant. It's just like crazy,
Mhm.
but but
That's awesome.
Were
yeah.
there huge herds of buffalo, or how did that play out?
So we didn't see a ton of buffalo when we were there. We did see one big herd one morning, and got quite a few shots. And then we had a couple other encounters with some loners. They call them Daga boys. Some of the big bulls that just kind of go off on their own, or they might even be in like small groups of 3 or 4 bulls or whatever. And we saw some of those and photographed a couple of those. But we didn't see a ton. And then after we left, Drew was like, he spent more time in the park after we left, and he ended up seeing tons of them. As he was in the park more, ended up seeing tons of them. So that it's just kind of that ebb and flow of wildlife as they move around in that, and we just weren't in the right places all the time to see. I would have loved to have spent more time photographing the buffalo for sure. I just think they have a lot of personality, and they just look so stinking ornery.
So with the Plains game, I mean, there's so much, right?
Uh-huh.
But I think I saw a message somewhere that would have come in on my Zoleo or something, but you said something about kudu. So I
Yeah.
love the kudu. Every time I was over there, it's just playing with that. And it is a lot like an elk, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I
They've
mean,
got
you take
horns and not antlers, but
right.
they're
I mean,
probably similar size and kind of have
yep.
the attitude. And
Yep. Yeah, I'd say that. And the one thing that's cool, like we talked about it, like you kind of knock off that little hump off their back and take their horns off, and you'd probably, and if it was brown, you'd think it was an elk. I mean, that's kind of they look a lot like an elk. But yeah, that's one of my favorites. And we didn't really get to spend a lot of time with any big kudu bulls. We saw a few, but didn't have the right situation to photograph them. But we photographed water buck. We photographed cheetahs. We ended up having really good encounters with some cheetahs, 2 brothers that were doing some hunting and stuff. Just everything you can think of. I mean, impala. I mean, we could have taken thousands of Impala photos. I mean, there was Impala everywhere, you know, and you quickly learn why that's probably the number one, you know, prey animal for most of those predators over there. But
What
yeah, I
about like
mean,
sable and Nyala and all that kind of? Did you see all that too?
no, we didn't see any Nyala or any sable. I think those are more northern, and they're more, you know, I don't even know if they're in Kruger, to be honest. There might be some in Kruger, but I think they're more, you know, north and out in other areas. So there's definitely a good reason to go back, right? There's other critters I haven't seen yet. So, but yeah, for us, for the most part, it was the wildebeest, zebras, you know, the giraffes, and the impala and the kudu. We did see quite a few kudu. But those were probably the majority of the plains game, or the ungulates that we were seeing, and we would see all of those on a really regular basis, you know.
And then we haven't talked much about lions. Did you see, or I'm sure you saw them, but did you get a chance to photograph lions?
Yeah, we did. We had a couple of really good encounters. Our guide actually in the first concession we were in, he saw the tracks in the road, and he got out and told us just to stay put for a minute. And he was going to just try to see where they entered the grass, and they were fresh that morning because that was the morning that it had rained. And that's so that I'll tell you this whole morning because it was cool how it unfolded. But this was after the rain, so the rain kind of started to die down, and he saw the tracks and he went to start to walk, and all of a sudden we heard him yell some obscenities and kind of freak out, like, holy, you know. And we all like turned around, and my wife Mel joked about it. She's like, you leave the keys here just in case you get eaten, right, you know, joking. And he went back there, and basically what he did is he saw where they went in, and he stepped into the grass to get a little better feel, and he literally almost stepped on a male lion that was laying right off the side of the road that we didn't even see. He was just tucked in the grass, and kicked it up, and it scared him, and he ran. It was no big deal, but it scared him, right? To the point where he's like, whoa, that was a little close. And then we went and got in the truck, and off we went and found him, and, you know, sat and photographed him for an hour or so. But so yeah, we had that pride of lions, and then we actually saw another pride of lions and actually photographed them a couple different times when we were in the other concession. And the one scenario unfolded where we actually had some really good light to photograph them too. The sun had just come out, and it was that golden hour, and the male gave me one shot that I think it's kind of, I'm shooting kind of down just because of the scenario, but he's coming up out of this like ditch, and he just steps into the light. So that might be one where it's kind of getting close to that, you know, that elk scenario. But yeah, no, that morning, back up just a bit, because that's the morning we ended up seeing the wild dogs too. So we saw the lions, and we hung out with them for a bit. And then he got a radio call from somebody else that said they'd seen some wild dogs hunting, and he was sitting there hum-hawing about should we do it, because they're usually so fast that they hunt, they just are on the move constantly. So for them to stay put and actually see them is pretty rare. So then he said, okay, we're going to go try this. We've seen the lions. Let's go. So I'm not joking. When we got back on the main road and we started hauling, and he was doing normal. And then he got a radio and call. And apparently the guy that was kind of keeping an eye on him, they'd taken something down. So then he was like, hold on. Because this is we're going to get to see these things. So hold on. And I mean, I'm not joking. We had people like leaving the seats in the back, you know, just we were going, and we were having a blast. It was fun. But, and those vehicles are amazing, by the way, just a side note. But we get to them and we pull right up, and I'm thinking, right, this is like day 2, and we're going to, like, you know, we got to stay back. These are predators and they're doing their thing. And we pull right up to them. I mean, it's like, like no big deal. And they could have cared less about us, right? They're just used to it. So, and then the hyenas are there and they're doing their thing. And all of a sudden we get some okay shots, but it's kind of backlit and it's not the best scenario. It's crazy. It's going on. You're seeing it. And then you get a couple photos, and then the dogs are gone. They take off running after something else. And the hyenas come in and they pick up some bones and scraps. And then the guy's like, well, you know, we follow him for a bit and we thought it was going to be over. Anyways, we ended up getting where we see him go into these trees. And we stop on the side of the road. And then there's hyenas just coming one after the other through. So he let us get out of the vehicle there and shoot the hyenas as they were going by. And we thought we were pretty much done. Well, then all of a sudden he heard the dogs making some noises that we didn't hear, but he heard it. He said, okay, let's go. Jumped in the vehicle and off we went. And they were just inside the trees and had killed something else. So then we're right there. They had just killed it. And then we sat there and had that experience with them. And they devoured that thing in about 5 minutes. I mean, it didn't take no time for them to devour it. And then, you know, they had their little scrap, and we got some pretty good photos. and then they took off and were gone. But that was, that morning, the whole morning was pretty slow because it was rainy and we didn't have good light, and it was kind of, it was like, man, this is just going to be a bust of a day. And then we end up having the lion encounter and then the wild dogs twice, so it was pretty, it's one of those, again, you just don't know what you're going to see and when it's going to happen and when it's going to go down. So,
and you don't stay home when it's getting stormy. Doesn't matter whether
no,
it's
heavens
in
no,
Africa
right?
or Alaska or Wyoming or Colorado. Get
We've
the
talked
heck
about
out
that
there
100 times.
stuff's going to get
Absolutely.
good. Yep.
Absolutely. Yep. Sorry, I hit the mic, but
That's
so
awesome.
yeah, man, I could just go on and on. We could make this thing a 4-hour. I could tell you story after story, but
But it definitely whets your appetite, right? Because you think, okay, I've been to Kruger.
Yeah.
But there's Botswana, there's Zimbabwe, there's Tanzania, there's
Amboseli,
Kenya,
Tanzania,
there's
Masai
all these
Mara.
places. It's like
Right,
you could
right.
spend a lifetime and not see everything. And
Right.
there's just so much.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely want to go back to Kruger, but it definitely, like you said, it whet my appetite to go. And, I know the next time I do go back, I'm going to extend my trip more and try to do another location, right? Like Amboseli or the Masai Mara or something, right? To try to broaden my exposure and to see some other things too. But to me, it's like, you got to do 2 weeks if you go. I mean, it's almost like you don't have to, but you're kind of crazy not to, because the worst part's that 15.5-hour flight, that, from here, for me, it's, a 4-hour, 3.5-hour flight to Atlanta. And then it's a 15.5-hour flight to Johannesburg. And then it's another roughly hour flight from there to get to the park, so.
Did they stop at that island to refuel?
Nope.
There's an island on the way to Johannesburg. So these planes must be, when I went last time, it was 20 hours from Delta, or on a Delta flight from Atlanta to Johannesburg, but we had to stop and get fuel.
Oh, interesting.
Before we actually hit the continent.
I could be wrong on this, and if one of the listeners knows, I'd love to hear. But I think everything I looked at, I think this is like that Atlanta to Johannesburg is the longest one, in the air trip you can take on an airplane, I think. Because everywhere else you go, it's a shorter, it's like 12 hours or 13 hours. It's maybe as long as it might be from that, that one time in the air. But
so for this trip, did you take care of all that itinerary? I mean, so Drew set the trip up. So you knew you had to be at a certain place at a certain time. Are you responsible for everything up to that point?
So the nice thing is Drew's been doing this for years over there for not just photography, but from a hunting standpoint too. And he's got a lot of relationships with the people where, we actually knew who to meet at the airport. When we got to Johannesburg, we were told, go find Mr. X. He'll be right here. He's got your name. Just don't talk to any other people, because they get kind of pushy and want to help you with your bags and stuff, which you don't want because they'll just take your bag potentially. So, we knew the rundown. We knew how to be safe. We got with Mr. X. He put us in a van with our gear, took us to the Airbnb, which was in Johannesburg. We stayed the night. It was in a big gated community, so everything, we felt very safe. But yeah, to your point, Drew just told us where we needed to be, but it when, and then when we told him, we would tell him the flight that we were on, and when it would get there, so that their team on the ground there would know what time to pick us up in that. And then the same thing on the way back, right? We ended up staying an extra day in Johannesburg, which was cool because we had to go and actually go downtown Johannesburg and do some souvenir shopping and stuff. So that was kind of fun to see, to see the Johannesburg proper and see some of the, the downtown area is really nice. And then there's some other areas, right, with the poverty in that you don't realize how the poverty in other parts of the world is way worse than it here is in the United States, and for my son to see some of that, and my nephew to see that, it's a kind of an eye-opening experience for them for sure. So we got to have that experience too. And then they get you back to the airport, same situation. We stayed at that same Airbnb again, very safe. They had us taken care of. They took us to the airport, dropped us off, and sent us on our way. And we were off and running. So he's got it figured out as far as all that goes. And then, as we make the next ones for the next year or two, or whatever, it'd be a very similar situation. Just need to be here so you can catch this flight by this time on this day from Johannesburg to Skakuza, and however you want to do it, however you want to get there, you can choose how you want to get there.
So you stayed at Airbnb and then you jump on another plane to fly into Kruger.
Correct.
Same airport,
it's
or
about
is it a different airport?
there's only this Kakuza is the one camp and or airport in the park,
But
and
did you
it's
have to
the
go to
only
that
one.
international airport to do that, to catch that flight, or did
Yes,
you
we did.
hit
I'm sorry,
another
we went back.
smaller municipal airport?
No, that's a good question. So we went back to the Johannesburg International or whatever that can't remember the number for the letters for the airport, but they're the main airport we flew into. We went back there and got in. It was super easy getting back on that little small flight. It's one of those flights where it's kind of like the smaller business jet we were on. I think it may have sat. It's a 2x3 seater. Again, no overhead space. It probably sat, I don't know, 30 or 40 people, maybe something like that. And they do, a couple trips a day from Johannesburg to Skakuza. But it's one where you get on a bus at the terminal and they take you out to the tarmac and you load the plane that way. So, but yeah, all of it's part of the adventure. I mean, we were talking about as a family because again, Mel and Hunter went with me, and the travel home was kind of rough. It was like 3 days after we left the park to actually get home, and I actually did a little bit of another jaunt, just a side note and a tip for people. They probably know better than me. I haven't done a ton of this international travel at this point, but we ended up saving quite a bit of money. When I was trying to book the airfare from Salt Lake City to Johannesburg, I was getting prices on Delta for, right around $3,000 to $3,200 a person. And, for three of us, that's almost $10,000 just to fly there. And I was like, man, that's crazy, So Drew said, hey, have you looked at what it's going to cost like from Dallas or something or whatever, or San Antonio? I'm like, no, I haven't. So I got on there and started looking. And a flight at that time when we booked from San Antonio to Johannesburg was only like $950 a person. So it was $300 flight for me to fly from Salt Lake City to San Antonio. We stayed the night, got up the next morning, caught our flight from San Antonio to Atlanta, which was the same flight from Atlanta to Johannesburg that I would have been on if I'd have flown from Salt Lake to, So it just was, it was kind of frustrating, but it saved me like $5,000. It was like crazy. It's like totally worth $100 hotel bill. And, so ultimately overall saved me for, it was worth that extra little jaunt. But when you're coming home, it's like, man, I wish I just didn't have to do this one last flight, but yeah,
Right.
It was worth it. But yeah, so that's a little trick, I never knew that, but it's crazy how it's so much cheaper, and you end up on the same flight for the main portion of the flight, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, Travis, my editor that does all the editing on the projects we do, he's like a professional travel agent, and he's got all those little tricks figured out. And I wouldn't have thought of that either. I would have been, it's good to have that experience with this first trip because now
Right.
Oh, hey, let's try this or this or this. And it's crazy that it can be that much different, right? What's the magic pill for going to why San Antonio?
Right. Yeah.
It's
I don't
crazy.
know. Yeah. It makes no sense to me. I'm sure it has to do with, maybe it's international airport to international airport or something. Who knows the connections, and I have no idea, but yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me, but you play the game right and it saves you that much money. It's well worth it. So.
You guys were wheeling and dealing on those tickets when we were in Yellowstone last winter, right?
Yeah, we bought them as early as we could, essentially, because I knew, didn't know, but I was worried about the prices climbing. And then, we were fortunate because who knew the gas thing was coming and everything else, right? And a lot of those other flights of folks that booked later ended up paying some pretty significant increases in pricing and fuel surcharges and things like that. So, yeah, we got fortunate that way too. So
the group that you were with, so there was 10, but there was 3 or 4 of you. Did you say your nephew went too?
Yeah, so it ended up basically being a family trip. Quite honestly, it was kind of funny. It ended up being my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, and then my other sister-in-law and her son, and then me, Mel, and Hunter. Mel, Hunter, and I. Sorry, Mom. That's my mom would have corrected me on that. She's always there in the back of my head. But and then Kelly Elmer and his wife came as well. And then the 10th one was actually Drew. He was the one that put it all together. So.
Oh, that's like perfect. I was going to ask you. I mean, it's like, did you know the other people? But obviously you did.
We knew everybody. So, that's always nice, right? And the other thing from a photography standpoint, I will say we were very spoiled because really the only ones that were really serious about photography was, Kelly and myself, and then my sister-in-law, she has a little nicer, she has a Nikon, and she's gone to Yellowstone with me a few times and she likes photography, but she's not quite as serious about it. as we are, right? Is nuts about it. So for the most part, Kelly and I would switch off having that front left lower seat, and then even the driver would let us sit with them in the front seat, where so we could just get a little bit lower sometimes too. And then you
Sit on
learn
his
pretty
lap
quick
or
that
what?
no, it's a passenger seat. So
Oh, gotcha.
oh yeah, other side of the road. That was the other thing, right?
Oh,
They
gotcha.
drive on the
Yeah.
right side, right? So yeah, good point, Ron. Good catch there.
So you've got pictures of all this, like the safari trucks and the tents and
Yep.
all, all the different accommodations that you stayed in. So we can put all that stuff up if everybody wants to see
Yeah.
kind of that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That was a big question for a lot of us. Like, what are we actually going to be? I mean, because Drew tells you, but it's hard to get it in your mind, right? What you're actually going to be in? What are the accommodations really like? And so, I actually have a couple of walkthrough videos I could send you to, Mike, if you wanted to put those up there. They're just cell phone videos, but it gives people a feel for the accommodations pretty good. So,
Yeah, I
but
think
yeah,
anything like that, especially if the trip's going to go again next year, it just gives you a snapshot into what's to be expected.
yep, yeah, and it's just I couldn't. I mean, Drew really nailed it. I'm just being sincere. I was really kind of wondering and worried, and was this really going to come out the way I was hoping? And I'm trying to do this kind of in a different way, and am I making a mistake by doing that? And a lot of people just go and they stay at one camp, one place the entire time they're there. And I really think this is the right way to approach it. You got a little more downtime in between driving to places, but I think the benefit is seeing different animals at different places. Because when for example, if you're on a concession, you're going to see, more than likely, you're going to see lions because they kind of are territorial and they have their territory. But you're probably going to see those same lions the entire time. So if you're there for a week, you might see those lions 3 or 4 times, but it's the same lions. So not that that's a bad thing, but it's just, we saw 3 different lion prides. We saw 3 different leopards. We saw 2 different sets of cheetahs. Which was, I think there's some benefit to that, is all I'm saying, right? From my perspective, anyways. So.
Well, and like I said earlier, it's limitless. I mean, you can go to so many places over there and see so much cool stuff, whether it's Zimbabwe or Tanzania or Botswana. I really want to go to Botswana at some point.
Right.
But it's that whole unknown thing. I've done some of the other ones where now that I've done it, I'm like, oh, okay. And I've been paid to go. So usually somebody else is taking care of all the logistics. So that's really cool because then you get to figure it out on somebody else's dime. But when you're paying for it, you really want to be pretty smooth. Right. And having that experience helps. But I've never been to like Botswana, but I'm sure it's not that big a deal. You just got to dig into it and figure it out. So maybe that's your job, Ron, is you lead a trip to Botswana next year.
There you
go. Well, Ron's got another trip.
Yeah.
for next year.
Speaking of that.
Yeah, speaking of. And the information will be up on the page here soon, but we are going to Svalbard, Norway, with a wild and exposed trip to hopefully photograph some polar bears. There's Arctic fox. There's lots of different scenarios up there, opportunities. And so we're gonna put a trip together. So that'll be coming out. It'll be the second week in May next year.
A side note, right, Ron? I can't remember what episode it was, but we ought to go back and look and maybe put that in the show notes too, as a link to that, a quick link to that episode that we did on Svalbard, just to get people, they can go back and listen to that and get excited about it. Yeah,
Sven, actually the guest that we had on the podcast, he'll be our guide. So,
right.
So you're going to do a write-up on that? So we'll have
we'll do a write-up with all the information and contact and sign up pages for people.
And is that one boat-based or are you going to be land-based?
You're on a boat. You fly into Norway proper, then fly out to Svalbard, and from that point you're on the boat. And I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the names of the towns. I'll spell them. But yeah, then we're on the boat the whole time. You'll depart the boat, and we'll talk about this. We'll probably have Sven on between now and then to kind of talk about how this trip is going to look. But the biggest thing there is the opportunity to photograph basically at eye level on the sea ice, on the breaking up sea ice from Zodiac. So you're a little bit lower angle than up on the big icebreaker boats and that you would actually be living on. And so that's the draw to Svalbard. Plus, you get these giant glaciers in the backdrops, of your shots. So it presents some pretty incredible opportunities, and I think just the experience of being out there on that boat on the sea ice, and it's in May, so it's still going to be cold that far north. So it's going to be an interesting trip. It's going to be a trip that maybe stretches you a little bit, not physically but mentally, and but at the same time, it's one of those Natural Geographic type experiences that we can go have together and just kind of enjoy it, get to know people along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. This is one of those adventure trips in my mind. This is just, it's probably a bucket list once in a lifetime kind of a trip for me, if, but, and probably for a lot of people, to be quite honest, but yeah, I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. So
I don't want to bring this down, but I do want to talk about, there was a ranger, like right after you guys left, there was a ranger that was killed basically because he would not provide these poachers with information on where to find the rhino. And you had talked about seeing black rhino and white rhino.
right.
And so Anton Mzimba, he's 42 years old. He was a ranger for 25 years, so he started at a very young age. And it was at a Timbavati. It's a private game reserve right around Kruger.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was shot and killed basically for withholding information from these groups of poachers. And it kind of goes to just how serious it is over there. And I was kind of surprised when you talked about them talking about these elephants, the bigger older males, and actually telling people what their areas were, because there's some species that they don't want any location information going out at all, because these guys will
Right.
come after them. But
So apparently I don't know, and I could be wrong on this, you guys, but apparently the elephants aren't as big of a concern anymore, and I think they're probably still concerned. Don't get me wrong, but and when I said they set an area, I mean
Mhm.
you got a picture of Kruger National Park, and it might be like this elephant lives in the top third of the park. You know what I mean? It's
Oh,
not very
gotcha.
specific.
Yeah, yeah.
But just to be clear, because that's a very good point, Ron. But a matter of fact, there's sighting boards throughout the park. You can go to the camps and you can see, like, they saw a crocodile here, and they saw elephants here, they saw cheetahs and lions or whatever here, there's a leopard here, and that board's kept up to date by just visitors. They just kind of mark where they've seen things, and it's kind of cool because it helps you kind of where you might want to focus if you want to see something. But
Mhm.
one of the rules is there you do not put any rhino sightings on that board. And the rhino thing is, like, it is a real big hot topic right now. And I think
Mhm.
that same situation, they not only killed him, but they shot his wife too, and they did it in his home. And I think his wife is still hanging on, but she's just barely hanging on. So I mean, it's a serious deal, and you don't realize when you're in your safari vehicle cruising around. We actually got to see, and I'll actually put a photo of this up. Well, maybe I don't know. We'll have to talk about this. Maybe it's not a good thing to put a photo of this up, but we actually saw on a couple different times. We saw some of the anti-poaching. What do you call them? The
Patrols.
Patrols.
patrols. Thank you. Good gravy.
Mhm.
The patrols cruising around with their guns and stuff, right? And they were really cool. We stopped and talked to them a couple times and got some photos with them a couple times and thanked them for doing what they do and stuff. And it's kind of a big deal that they're out there doing that, and they take it serious. They were um, parking the vehicle and going on foot patrol in specific areas and stuff and that, and trying, doing the best they can. And they got very limited resources over there to try to do that. And the white rhinos we saw a family group of 5, and that was pretty fortunate. Apparently, they did have a big male that was part of the group, and then there was a mom, and then like 2 older siblings, I guess, if you will, and then a young one. And the young one was the only one that still had his whole horn. The other ones, they cut off the horns, they euthanize them, not euthanize, they tranquilize and then cut off their horns to save their lives, right? So that people aren't trying to poach them and kill them for their horns. And then we did see the one black rhino, which I won't get into any details about where, but we saw the one black rhino, and it was really cool to see it because I think they said it was a younger male, but he was a fairly good size, and the black rhino, and he still had his whole horn. So that was pretty cool to see. But, knowing that, it's like, how long will he make it, and how long will he have that horn? And, you worry because there's so much corruption and things like that, which obviously we just talked about a little bit, that, even some of those safari guys might be, helping give information out, unfortunately, because, for those people, the kind of money they get from doing something like that, feeds their family for a year. And that goes back to the whole poverty situation and what drives a lot of this, I think, too. So anyways, it's kind of a sad situation and kind of scary, actually. But when you're in your safari vehicle and enjoying it, you don't really think about it until you get back to the States and hear about a story like that. It's like, gosh, dang, man.
Yeah. But it goes to show just how serious these issues are. And not only,
Right.
that it happens in our part of the world, but over there, it's it's literally a life and death thing. And so to pay attention to some of those rules and pay attention to the fact that, hey, turn the GPS off on your camera so you don't have it in your metadata, and don't be posting exact locations and that kind of thing. It's for real.
Back to the whole idea that you got to be in the gate and you can't be driving around the park. It's not because they're necessarily worried about you being a poacher. I think a lot of it is for your own safety. Because if you come across poachers, they don't ask questions, they just shoot. If you catch them in the act, so to speak, they're not going to ask questions. And it's unfortunate that that's the kind of level of situation this is at. But your safety is literally, at risk if you're out there, cruising around at night where you shouldn't be. So.
What were you
Sorry,
gonna
you
Mike?
say like there was a sighting on the north side of the park, what you referenced. How big is Kruger? I mean, as far as size wise, did you remember? I guess we could all look it up online, but I'm just curious.
Right. No, I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's long. I know that's kind of like long and skinny, and I may say that, but I'm just
because it's really not that far. You could potentially, like, I've had buddies in the past that would fly into Johannesburg and then they would just drive up.
Right,
so it's
and
not
you
like
could. It's 7,523 miles squared.
Miles or kilometers?
This says miles that I'm
Okay.
looking at here. Let's see. 19,623 kilometers squared. Yeah. So it's big, it's a big area, but you could drive. I mean, I think Drew said it's about a 5-hour drive from Johannesburg to Kruger. But just getting on a plane that's, less than an hour, and, you literally get up this altitude, they give you a drink and you drop back down and, jump in a rental vehicle and off you go. It's one of those kind of flights, but
They run by
I
you
just looked
throwing
it up.
peanuts and pop and
Right.
park it and you landing.
Right. Exactly.
I just looked it up. It's 4.9 million acres.
4.9 million acres.
So you figure Yellowstone is 2 million acres. Denali
Right,
National
so-
Park is 6 million acres. So it's approaching Denali size.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So it's 360 kilometers long and has an average width of 65 kilometers. So that gives you an idea of.
So, and if you look, I'm just looking at a map here. It's borders Zimbabwe, and then Botswana is on the same latitude, well, parts of it. So Mozambique is right there too. I mean, that's a awesome location, right? And
It is.
accessible.
Right. Yeah, the way Drew put it, right, is it's like for the first timers going to Africa, it's really kind of like it's one of the coolest places to go first, because you got a really good opportunity to see a lot of variety in one place, which is in some of the other places you won't see as much variety, is kind of the way I understand it. But.
Well, and South Africa gets a bad rap too because it's like, it's all high fence. Everybody thinks of high fence, and you think of a lot of this baby thing where they raise these baby lions for petting zoos and things like that, and then
Right.
then they're destroyed when they get too old or whatever. But this is true wild. I mean, it's not high fence. It's not. It is Africa, which it's the cool part of wildlife viewing in Africa.
Yep, I would agree, and that kind of surprised me. I actually expected more of the high fence stuff, but there was no high fences. We didn't come across a single fence the entire time we were there. So yeah, that's a big deal to me. I mean, I would not, just personally, I would not be interested in going to a high fence operation to photograph wildlife. You know, that's just my personal opinion on something like that. But you know, teach their own. There are people that do, and there's places where they take it, they are in a high fence situation, right? I know there's areas over there that are high fence that are fairly large, and there's no hunting or anything. They're there for safari type viewing and that. So but that where we were, Kruger, that whole area, like you said, when we flew in, the cool thing, like you're flying in from Joburg, and we're starting to get to Atlanta. My wife's like, are those elephants? It's like, oh, look, those are giraffes. We're landing, and you don't realize you're landing in the park. So of course you're seeing, stuff from the air. And again, there's just, every time you turn a corner, there's more wildlife, and it's incredible, the diversity and the amount of wildlife that's in Southern Africa.
Now I want to go. I kind of had it out of sight, out of mind for a while. I've been a few times, and then I just didn't think about it. And then you start hearing all these stories, and it's like, it'd be super cool to go back. It'd be cool to do, a lot of these people that do the overlanding thing where you have a vehicle and you just travel through. I mean, you would need 6 months to do something like that, but that would be kind of cool too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it'd be an amazing trip.
Yeah, every time you'd send a message, I was getting a little bit more and more jealous and upset that I didn't put more thought into it, but what it is. This year was a little tight, so.
Right.
And
yeah, next time.
Yeah. Hopefully won't have anybody else getting married next time.
Right.
So, well, awesome show, awesome conversation, and thanks for sharing all that, both of you guys.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm envious of you. I talked to you a couple times, via text on the way or while you were up there, and it was just, that's where I would rather be. Either of those places I would have rather been, but
well, it sounds like Jason's tent experience was way better than my tent experience.
Yeah.
4 foot by 6 foot tent for 45 days wasn't horrible, but it was
versus the luxury yurt where they're bringing you mimosa in the morning for breakfast.
Yeah.
So keep your eyes open. There's more trips to come. And there is still, I don't know when this is going to come out, but there is still a spot open on the last bear trip of the year. So make sure you check out the Wild and Exposed page, jump on that boat with Mike, and get up there and have some incredible opportunities to film some Alaskan brown bears.
Fishing bears, hopefully.
Fishing bears, yeah. Yeah, but we'd love to have you all along, no matter where we're going. And thank you all for listening to another episode of Wild and Exposed Podcast.
You've been listening to the Wild and Exposed Podcast. If you haven't yet, please give us a rating and a review. And make sure you're subscribed so that you'll get every episode we produce as soon as we drop it. And as always, thanks for tuning in.
We're gonna make it someday. Nothing's gonna get in our way.